Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and today we're going to continue our discussion of genealogy standards, standards for researching, and today we're going to cover standard number 42, evidence discrimination, standard number 43, evidence integrity, and standard number 44, evidence reliability. And we're continuing to use Genealogy Standards, second edition revised. And please remember that I do not represent the Board for Certification of Genealogists. I am just me. So standard number 42 is evidence discrimination. Genealogists include in their reasoning all known sources and information items that seem relevant to a research question. They exclude all sources and information items that seem irrelevant to that question. To ensure that their reasoning identifies all known relevant evidence, genealogists examine their justifications for including and excluding sources and information items. They are prepared to defend those justifications. See glossary for definitions of evidence, information, research, question, and source. One of the biggest problems that genealogists have is honestly knowing that the sources exist. So that comes with experience, but the operative words are include in their reasoning all known sources and information items that seem relevant to the research question. Part of your issue is the concept of known sources, which means in the beginning of your life as a professional genealogist, you might, especially in areas that you're not yet truly competent in, not know all those known sources. And I take umbrage with the use of the word all. I do not like the word all whenever I hear it. It's just a problem for me. The issue then becomes you should exclude all sources and information items that seem irrelevant to the question. Well, the problem with that is, how do you know those sources and information items that are irrelevant unless you've actually looked at them? In other words, there's basically two kinds of things. You're going to exclude, for example, say you had a problem in 1930, you would exclude the information from the 1820 census because they weren't alive in 1820. Now, you might end up looking at the 1820 census later, but it's not relevant to a problem in 1930. I guess is what they mean there. But from my perspective, you are going to look at everything that you believe is going to help you answer the problem that you have. And from the beginning, you know some things which truly are going to be germane to what you are in fact looking for. And then you know there are certain things that are totally not germane to what you are looking for. So you're going to exclude those things. But there's going to be this gray area of things that you're not quite sure. Or my favorite circumstance is when an archivist tells me that there will not be any information in those records that you will be interested in. I definitely don't like, and I'm not picking on a specific archivist or archivist in general either, but I've been told many times that there's nothing in those records. I don't care. I want to see them. The favorite line that I would get from an archivist after the fact would be, Mr. Scott, no one has ever looked at those records before. Probably meaning genealogists, but remember, I've talked about it before, the Weather Bureau. I live for somebody to tell me that nobody's ever looked at those records before. What's important is you recognize that you may not know all the known sources. You may exclude a source because you don't know that source, and that source is very relevant to your needs at the time, but you're just unaware of it. So you want to be very careful in the use of evidence discrimination. Now, standard number 43 is evidence integrity. Genealogists do not trim, tailor, slight, or ignore potentially relevant evidence to fit a bias or preconception, to harmonize with other evidence, or for any other reason. See glossary for definition of evidence. Oh my gosh. This is probably one of the most important standards because it will have to deal with your overcoming your bias or preconceptions. It's most important to address any problem from the perspective of a clean slate. Recognize that there are very good reasons for not trimming, tailoring, sliding, or ignoring potentially relevant evidence, because someone else will not ignore it. And when it comes time for you to, in the marketplace, going back to evidence discrimination, defend those justifications, well, defend your proof statement or defend the conclusions that you've come to, you will not win because you trimmed, slighted, or ignored potentially relevant evidence, whether it fits your bias or misconception or not. And I especially like for any other reason. So basically, don't do this. Make sure that your evidence has integrity, always. In other words, look at all of it. Don't exclude any of it. Deal with it. If you don't deal with it, someone else will deal with it for you, and it will be an embarrassment for you. So standard 44 is evidence reliability. Genealogists recognize that all seemingly relevant evidence item may be proved reliable or not reliable. They understand that unreliable evidence may be useful, for example, to follow up as a clue, explain an error, or resolve conflicting evidence. See glossary for definitions of conflicting evidence, and resolution. This standard is what allows me to sleep at night as a publisher, because I publish lots of stuff that may prove to not be reliable, because as a publisher, I don't check every nuance of that which I publish. I look for certain clues as to whether I believe it's reliable or not, but I don't do a deep dive in every single book I do. That may account for why I have 10,000 books in print. Some of them are much more reliable than others. Those that I know are not reliable to a certain degree, I don't reprint. I can think of a couple of those which I haven't reprinted. The New York probate records is probably a good example of a book that I won't reprint, which was printed by Heritage Books 20 years ago. There are some marriage books that I won't reprint. There are some cemetery books that I won't reprint because we found some glaring errors in them that were brought to our attention after the fact. So we don't reprint those. But if it's just some little stuff, or it's generally reliable but has unreliable pieces, then I'm going to reprint it, because that evidence, although unreliable, may be a clue to something else. It's sort of like family stories. They all have, most of them all have a grain of truth in them. But you need to be able to understand that evidence by itself is not reliable. Evidence in collusion or in combination or compatible with other evidence probably is reliable, as long as you know where the original source is, because it can happen that they're all wrong because they're all based on the original wrongness. So, and we'll deal a little bit more of that when we get farther into some of the standards. But anyway, so this has been Craig, and this has been Just Genealogy, and we've been talking about standards for researching. We're almost through these, and we'll continue down the road soon. Thank you all for joining me today.